Well, hello, my name's Brendan McLaughlin and I'm the Senior Minister here at Earlwood Anglican. And I want to start with a story of a woman who comes home from work one day to find her husband very excited. He meets her at the front door and says, "Honey, I've got a big surprise for you for dinner." So he blindfolds her and carefully leads her to her seat at the dining room table. Yet as he's about to take the blindfold off, the phone rings and he says, "Look, I'll get rid of them quickly. Please promise me you won't peek until I get back." And the woman agrees. The problem was the woman had had a late lunch, which wasn't agreeing with her. She was feeling a little gassy, if you know what I mean. But she could hear that her husband was way back in the kitchen, so she leant over and relieved the gas quite loudly, as it turns out. And then she blew away the smell as she heard the husband returning. And the husband came back, apologised for taking so long and said, "Look, you didn't peek, did you?" To which the woman said no, and she's feeling very, very pleased with herself. She got away with it. Well, the husband takes the blindfold off to reveal 12 dinner guests sitting around the table. Surprise! Well, I tell that story because today we're looking at a passage in the Bible of a dinner party of sorts in which the host commits a very serious social faux pas. Yet we're not focusing today on that. What we're focusing on is Jesus' response to this person. You see, across the next 4 weeks of October, we're looking at different people who actually meet Jesus in person. And what we're particularly interested in is how Jesus interacts with these people. You see, one of the common misconceptions when it comes to Jesus is what Jesus would say to us if we met him. But you see, when we see Jesus encounter people in the Bible, people just like you and me, he always surprises. So take today's passage, for example. We're looking at the very famous miracle of Jesus turning water into wine from John chapter 2. But what the author of John's Gospel tells us is this is the very first miracle Jesus ever performed. Now let's think about that for a second, all right? If Jesus really was who he said he was, all right, the Son of God with unlimited creative power, don't you find it surprising that he uses his incredible power to fix a catering problem? Like, why choose this as your inaugural miracle? You see, if you want to convince someone of something, you make sure that your wording is precise, don't you? Like when Samsung releases their latest phone, they don't say, "may catch on fire." When Facebook releases their latest update, they don't say, "even better at collecting all your data and selling it on to advertisers," do they? So what does it say about Jesus that his very first miracle was not healing the sick or raising the dead? It was turning some 600 litres of water into wine. Well, the first thing it says is, this must be a true story. Right? If you are making up a religion, there is no way in the world that your first miracle would be this one. And so the first thing this tells us is this story really happened. But the second thing it says is, if we don't know why turning water into wine is Jesus' first miracle, then we don't fully understand Jesus yet. My hope is to start to rectify that today by showing you something even more surprising about this passage, and that is what happened to the groom at this wedding when he encountered Jesus. And I've got 3 very simple points to help us understand this. They're all self-explanatory. So the points are how this man disgraces himself, how Jesus takes his disgrace away, and what Jesus replaces his disgrace with. So if you're not sure about what Jesus would say if he met you, then can I encourage you, stick with us, because I guarantee what Jesus would say will surprise you. So let's dive in. And our passage today is from the Gospel of John, starting at chapter 2, verse 1. It says this. On the third day, a wedding took place in Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." Now, 2 quick things to note. Firstly, weddings back in Jesus' day were huge events. I mean, the average first century person would look at the average Hollywood wedding these days and go, meh. All right. The reason being, weddings would go for up to a week back then. They were huge events. The second thing to note is that the groom was responsible for catering that week-long wedding. And the most important part of the catering was the wine. The reason being that wine was a symbol of joy in ancient times. And so for a wedding to run out of wine meant the wedding was running out of joy. I went to a wedding many years ago in which the bride was so nervous about giving her speech that she vomited through the entire reception. Right? There was very little joy for that poor bride that day. But for the joy in the first century wedding was found in the wine. And this groom has committed a serious social faux pas. They have no more wine. Well, Jesus' mother, Mary, finds out about it quite early on, probably because she was helping out with this wedding. I mean, to feed people for 7 days required an entire team, and Mary was probably one of the aunties. She was probably a literal auntie, or at least she was a local auntie that was helping out with the preparations. And she realises just how much of a disaster this is and goes to the one person she knows who will help. Now, given we're told that this is Jesus' very first miracle, Mary was probably not expecting what happened. She just knew there was something special about her eldest son and that he would move heaven and earth, figuratively speaking, to help someone in need. All right? What's surprising, though, is Jesus' response. Have a look at verse 4. "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour has not yet come." Now, scholars have long agonised over Jesus' words here. Now, you see, when Jesus refers to his hour, he's referring to the cross. Right? Several times in John's Gospel, we're told it wasn't Jesus' hour had not yet come, Jesus' hour had not yet come. Yet the night before his crucifixion, we're finally told Jesus' hour has come. Now, here's the million-dollar question that has stumped scholars for years. Why does Jesus talk about the cross when Jesus' mother is talking about running out of wine? Well, as we've said, the groom was responsible for the catering. And in a shame-based culture, to fail to fulfill your social obligations would bring enormous disgrace on both yourself and your entire family, all right? This guy is about to get cancelled first century style. He will from henceforth on be known as the guy who ran out of wine, ran out of joy at his own wedding. And Mary knows this. And so when she says to Jesus, they have no more wine, what she's actually saying is, take this young man's disgrace away. All right? Don't let this poor young man be forever sniggered at in the street as the guy who ran out of wine, ran out of joy at his own wedding. And so when Jesus says, my hour has not yet come, what he's saying is, what do you think I've come to do, Mother? Right? The sole purpose for which I was born into this world was to take my people's disgrace away. Yet my mission, my hour, the reason I'm here, is way more significant than a simple catering error. And Jesus goes on to show us this in the way he goes about taking this man's disgrace away. So even though Jesus' mum, he says to his mum, why do you involve me? He decides to help, right? But the way in which he does so speaks to Jesus' actual mission while he was here on earth. So we read this in verse 6. Have a read with me. Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding between 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water, so they filled them to the brim. Now, one of the things you learn about Jesus from the Bible is he didn't do random. All right? There was always significance, always meaning to everything Jesus did. And so there were probably dozens of ways Jesus could have created 600 litres of wine for this wedding. There were probably wine skins and jars all over the place. It was a week-long wedding. So we have to assume that Jesus chose these jars for a reason. So why is it that Jesus chose jars that were used by the Jews for ceremonial washing? Well, ceremonial washing is different to actual washing. It was not like scrubbing for surgery. There was no soap involved. It was a practice commanded by God in the Old Testament for when people were going to the temple. And the ceremonial washing symbolised that you were sinful. You were spiritually dirty. And so before you could come into God's presence, you needed to be cleansed from that sin. So it's similar to in the movie The Greatest Showman, where the circus performers actually get an audience with the Queen of England. Now, they didn't show up wearing their leotards all covered in sawdust from the big top. They were immaculately presented to meet the Queen. Now, the thing about God is, because God is spirit, he doesn't actually care about our physical appearance. He doesn't care about physical dirt. He cares about spiritual dirt. And because every single one of us has done some things in our life that have brought disgrace upon us, or at least they would if they got out on Twitter, right? All right. This is why God commanded people to ceremonially wash before coming into his presence. And this is the next surprising thing about this passage. You see, from this moment on in this wedding, no one was able to ceremonially wash themselves. Right? We have this book on our shelves at home. It's called Spotless, and it's about cleaning up domestic disasters. All right? Nowhere in this book does it say you clean something by washing it in red wine. I mean, have you ever tried that? You see, the spilled wine on the front of this book is actually one of the disasters you need to clean up. And so here's the question. Why would Jesus do this? Why would God the Son take away the opportunity for God's people to ceremonially wash themselves for God? Well, it's because he's saying, now that I'm here, you don't need to ceremonially cleanse yourself anymore. Why? Because my hour, my death, is going to cleanse you once for all. Friends, if you ever find yourself wondering, what is all this Christianity about? What is this Jesus all about? This is it. All right. The reason the cross is the symbol for Christianity is because on the cross, Jesus cleansed his people of their spiritual dirt forever. And the way he did that was by taking our spiritual dirt upon himself. So you see, when Deb and I got married, I still had a HECS debt from my engineering degree. And so when we got married, that debt became Deb's as well. And this is what it's like when you become a Christian. All your spiritual dirt, all your spiritual debt gets transferred into Jesus' account. And his death on the cross was him paying that debt off for you. And so not only is it surprising that Jesus decides that his inaugural miracle is going to be taking this poor chap's social disgrace away, what's even more surprising is how Jesus takes all his people's disgrace away by cleansing us of our spiritual dirt. But there's still one more surprise in this passage. Have a look at verse 8. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." So they did so. Now, the master of the banquet, who is he? He's the guy who is responsible for keeping the party going. Okay, there was a movie a couple of years ago called The Wedding Planner. That's kind of what the master of the banquet did. He was in charge of the food, of the music, of the entertainment, of making sure the father-in-law didn't speak for too long in his speech and put people to sleep. Okay, and what we see here is that the master of the banquet tastes this water that's been turned into wine, verse 9, and he loves it. Now, here's the thing. If you believe in God, which the majority of humans still do, that's not the surprising thing, right? If God the Son is going to miraculously make wine, of course it's going to be the good stuff. What's surprising comes next. Have a look, just at the end of verse 9. What does he say? Then he, the master of the banquet, called the bridegroom aside and said, everyone brings out the choice wine first and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now. Now here's the thing. Who made the wine? Jesus did. But who gets the credit? The bridegroom does. Now, before we go too deeply into that, I want us to understand exactly what the bridegroom is getting credit for. Okay? So we're told that each of these stone water jars held between 20 to 30 gallons. Now, down the bottom of most Bibles, there's a little conversion table there, a little conversion in the footnote, and mine says that's about 75 to about 115 litres. So let's do some rounding. Let's just say each of these water jars holds 100 litres. So that's 600 litres of wine. Now, the average wine bottle holds 750 mils, so times 600 by 0.75, and we have 800 bottles of wine here. Now, a cheap bottle of wine will cost you about $15. The average bottle is about $30 to $40, but we're told that this is fine wine. This is $100 a bottle kind of wine. So multiply 800 bottles by $100 each, and we are talking a whopping $80,000 worth of wine here. Now, what do you think happened to that groom's reputation that day? All right? He went from being potentially the kind of guy who will be known forever as the one who ran out of wine at his wedding to being forever known as the guy who supplied $80,000 worth of wine at his wedding. All right, he has gone from a lifetime of disgrace to a lifetime of honour. But the truly surprising thing about this passage is it wasn't his honour. Right? Jesus was the one who made the wine. Yet the bridegroom gets all the credit. And friends, that's how it works with Christianity. You see, when you become a Christian, when you say sorry to God for your spiritual dirt and put your faith in Jesus, Jesus doesn't just take your spiritual debt into his account, he puts his spiritual righteousness into your account. Right? It's like marrying a billionaire. Your bank account goes from $20,000 college debt to billions of dollars overnight. Right? Jesus doesn't just take people's disgrace away, he replaces it with incredible honour. Right? We get to take the credit for Jesus' perfect righteousness. So what does all this mean? What do we do with this surprising story? Well, there may be some listening today who have not given Jesus much thought so far. Right? Chances are you've heard of him. Most people have heard of Christianity. Most people have heard of the cross. But there may be some listening today who have not yet decided to give their allegiance to Jesus. To you, I would say this. Do you understand who it is you're actually rejecting? See, most people who ignore Jesus do so because they think things like, oh, what is Jesus going to give me anyway? Won't he just take all my fun away? I don't really agree with some of Christianity's morality. Or, look, I feel bad enough about my sin as it is without some spiritual guru rubbing it all in. But to those people, I would say, do you understand who it is you're rejecting? Right? You're rejecting the person who sees your disgrace. Right? Jesus sees to the deepest, darkest corners of your life. He sees your most shameful disgrace. Yet he doesn't berate you for it. He doesn't tweet about it to the world. He doesn't cancel you over it. He doesn't even unfriend you for it. Right? Instead, he offers to take your disgrace away and replace it with immense honour. And what that means is, right, this is how it plays out in life. When your peers might be making you feel disgraced, Jesus is busy showering you with honour. So I'll give you some examples, all right? If your peers call you boring, Jesus calls you a joy to be around. If the judges on X Factor or The Voice say you've got no talent, Jesus says you have the exact talents I'm looking for. If your test scores tell you you're not too bright, Jesus says you've got the exact right kind of intelligence for me. If the opposite sex rejects you romantically, Jesus says you are totally marriage material for me. And if social media calls you ugly, Jesus calls you beautiful. And the thing about Jesus is because he is God the Son, he actually has the power to overthrow all the accumulated verdicts that others might have passed on to you. He is the only judge that matters. Right? So becoming a Christian means you worry less about what the serfs are saying about you because you already have approval of the King. And friends, every day you continue to reject Jesus, you're rejecting the God who wants to take your disgrace away and replace it with incredible honour. But wait, there's even more. You see, for those who have given their allegiance to Jesus, for the Christians who are listening today, what this passage asks is, how is your joy? Right? The reason Jesus' inaugural miracle is turning 600 litres of water into wine is to show where Jesus is steering humanity and history. Right? Jesus didn't come just to turn your disgrace into honour. He came to bring abundant blessing on top of that honour. Right? Why did Jesus miraculously make over $80,000 worth of fine wine for the tail end of a wedding? It is to show that when you have had your complete fill of all the honour and all the blessing he wants to pour out on you, there is still more to come that you will ever be able to take in. So what this passage says to Christians is, are you enjoying the enormous blessings Jesus gives you every day? How is your joy? Because if your joy is waning at the moment, this passage says, it's not because Jesus isn't blessing you. He blesses you abundantly every day. Right? It's because you are not recognising his blessings. You aren't appreciating his mercy and forgiveness. You aren't acknowledging his sunshine and the rain he sends. You aren't thankful for the air you breathe or the food you eat. And you're not grateful for the incredible freedoms you enjoy or the friends and family he has put into your life. See, what this passage says to Christians is, take responsibility for your joy. But that's the surprising story of Jesus turning water into wine. It's not surprising that he could do it. Of course, the Son of God could do it. What's surprising is why he did it. He did it to show that the purpose for which he came into the world some 2,000 years ago was to take his people's disgrace away and replace it with abundant honour and blessing. The question we need to ask ourselves is, how are we going to respond to this surprising Saviour?